A proxy war that is starting to lose its proxy. Israel's secret service, the Mossad, along with Cypriot police, have foiled a planned attack by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps on Israelis in the Mediterranean island. This mirrors an assassination attempt on Israeli billionaire Teddy Sagi in Cyprus in 2021 and foiled attacks on Israelis in Turkey last year, both planned by Iran. Whilst relations between Iran and Israel have been poor since the Iranian Revolution in 1979, tensions are close to reaching a boiling point as Iran develops nuclear capabilities at a rapid rate, with uranium from Iran's nuclear sites nearing weapons grade, along with Tehran's funding of Hamas. But the former international pariahs are making a comeback on the global stage, with recent normalization with Saudi Arabia, weaponry deals with Russia, and a burgeoning relationship with China. With all of this in the equation, how worried should Israel be about Iran? Would it benefit Israel if Iran was subject to a nuclear deal, allowing it to build its nuclear arsenal under the watchful Western eye, or should Iran be isolated to try and prevent it from going nuclear? How can Israel deal with the Iranian threat? Are Israel and Iran heading to war?
All right, gentlemen, let's get to it. Are Israel and Iran heading to war? As always, we begin with our quick fire round, 30 seconds each to lay out your initial stance on the matter, and we pick up the conversation from there. So, Mr. Brodsky, please take the lead.
It's great to be with you, Ellie. I think that this is a continuation, really, of a very long proxy or shadow war between the Islamic Republic and Israel that has played out across the Middle East and also around the world. So I see more continuity than change here. I would say that one of the ways to avert a larger conflict would be for the European Union to actually impose consequences on the Islamic Republic from taking these kinds of lethal extraterritorial operations on its territory.
Yeah, the normal is abnormal, so to speak. Dr. Javendafar, your thoughts?
Look, there's nothing new about this. The Islamic Republic started supporting jihad, Islamic Palestinian Islamic Jihad, since the late 1980s. It was involved through Hezbollah in the attack against the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires and the Amia bombing in 1994. This is nothing new. This is something we're used to. The question is, why did it take so long for Israel to respond? According to newspaper reports from abroad, Israel only started responding in 2011. Could have been before.
Yeah. Last but not least, Lieutenant Colonel Conricus, your take?
Good evening. I agree that it's essentially not really new. We see Iran attacking on various fronts, both inside Israel, using their proxies, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and terror organizations in northern Samaria, and trying desperately to strike Israeli targets abroad, so far failing, thanks to the outstanding capabilities of Israeli security forces. So I fear that we're in for more of the same, perhaps escalation. Hopefully, we'll be able to continue to defend Israeli civilians as we are.
Okay, gentlemen, let's feel free to interact from this point onwards to engage in a conversation. But I do want to stay on the topic of those foiled or attempted terror plots. Lieutenant Colonel Conricus, what's the benefit of such attempted attacks abroad? Just a showcase of abilities, and I'm speaking of both Israel and Iran here.
I don't think that Iran is really showcasing capabilities because so far, thankfully, they have not been successful in striking Israelis abroad, not in Turkey, not in Greece, not in Cyprus, not in Thailand, if we go back a little bit further, and of course, most importantly, not in Israel. So what we're seeing is continued desperate efforts by the Islamic Republic of Iran to use outsourcing, proxies, local thugs in different countries in order to strike against Israeli targets, and Israeli security forces, thankfully, still being one step ahead and thwarting these attacks through very successful and well-coordinated activities together with local enforcement agencies. This time it's Cypriot and Greece, but we're, of course, we know of others. So bottom line is we're not seeing Iranian success.
I disagree. I think the Iranian regime has unfortunately been very successful in killing Israelis. It has been doing so just after the first Intifada. The Iranian regime is responsible for killing Oslo, partly because of its support for Hamas and Islamic Jihad. The Islamic Republic is responsible for Shimon Peres not being elected in 1996 because of a number of suicide bombings just before the 1996 elections, which led to Netanyahu winning the elections narrowly. The Iranian regime succeeded in torpedoing Oslo II again, and we saw the massive intifada afterwards that the Khamenei regime also sponsored, and things are about to get worse. Eli, the Iranian, last week, it was by no accident that the head of Islamic Jihad and Hamas were together at the same time in Tehran. Mm-hmm. The Iranians are planning a major escalation from the West Bank.
So,
yeah, there's no doubt. I totally agree that the Iranians have their fingers in many, many pies, many dirty, evil, violent terror pies, to speak metaphorically. No doubt about that. I'm not sure that they have all of those capabilities that you just mentioned. They're definitely trying and wanting to. But I think that if we look forward and look at where this is all going and what's beyond or what's behind the next corner, I definitely agree that we are definitely looking at what appears to be a very worsening situation if the Iranians will have access to additional unfrozen funds, which they will undoubtedly use for their terrorist activities.
Jonathan, first of all, I'm sure you heard about the rocket launch today, the experimental one in West Bank. Well, that's just the beginning. And Iran is currently under sanctions, and Biden's not gone back to the Iranians with the deal. And it doesn't take that much for Iran to transfer blueprints of these missiles to these groups in the West Bank. They can make it in any blacksmith shop, in any workshop, and these rockets could soon be on our way. And what we're doing, unfortunately, it's really helping the Iranian regime, the current Israeli government, with its policies. First and foremost, instead of strengthening relations with the United States, it's worsening relations with the United States. And that very much, I think, is a boost to the Iranian regime. And of course, we see the pogroms in the West Bank against the Palestinians. I think there have been 4 or 6 so far. And they have not been stopped. And the current government, if anything, instead of strengthening the IDF, we saw the member of parliament Strzok today asked whether the IDF is like the Wagner group. Yeah. The IDF has never been under attack by any government like it has been today. The Israeli people have never been divided more than they have been under the current government. So of course this is emboldening Iran. Believe you me, the Iranians are very emboldened by this, and things are going to get worse.
Mr. Brodsky, circling back to one point Dr. Javendafar made on the Israel-U.S. relationship, or lack thereof at this point in time. Was Jerusalem abandoned by Washington when it comes to Iran's nuclear program or Iran's regional ambitions?
Well, I don't think that they're abandoned. I would say that there are significant differences over how to approach the issue. And I think that we need as close of a relationship between Israel and the United States as possible in order to increase our collective deterrence. But I just want to go back to a point that was made before with regard to this attack in Cyprus, or attempted attack in Cyprus. I think it was very interesting that this attack occurred under the watch of the commander of the IRGC's intelligence organization, Mohammad Kazemi. He is a new commander, and let's remember his predecessor, Hossein Tayeb, was replaced after a series of embarrassing failures. So I think it speaks to the fact that this also was thwarted, this attack, thankfully, as to Iranian capabilities.
Lieutenant Colonel Conricus, do you think it's fair to say that, you know what, I will rephrase it, is a nuclear deal, if indeed revived, is an Israeli failure, Israeli policy failure?
I would say that it would first and foremost be a very dangerous step that would, in my mind, not serve neither American not Israeli, and not regional interests of stability and prosperity. It would embolden Iran. It would unfreeze funds that Iran will undoubtedly use in order to promote violence and terror. And it's definitely not a success. And as alluded to before, not only are the ties, the actual ties between Israel and its only ally in the world, real ally, the US, very important, but also the optics of those ties and how the two leaders and the governments get along. And unfortunately, I have to agree with Professor Meir. There are many things that are not playing well and many things that need to be improved. And I think that the state of Israel needs to reprioritize and understand what really is important, and to get a reminder of how important the relationship with the US is. Last thing, I think that this would also be a mistake by the US administration to go ahead and give Iran this agreement without really getting anything in return for unfreezing funds and basically allowing Iran legally to enrich up to 60% and be at breakout capacity.
Yeah, we will dive in further into the nuclear deal. But before we wrap up this part of the conversation, Dr. Javendafar, I conceded to one.
I disagree. If the Biden administration can freeze enrichment at 60%, that's good for the state of Israel. Jonathan, we don't want the Iranians getting to 90%, because from there it's 2 years away. If we can get the Iranians to stop at 60%, that's an achievement for the state of Israel. Otherwise, if this current situation continues, Iran's going to have more and more stockpile of enriched uranium. Of course, we don't want to be in this situation, but it was Mr. Netanyahu who dreamt up this sweet dream that, with Mr. Biden, those two countries alone are going to stop the Iranian regime. It was a fantastic failure of understanding the Islamic Republic, because the Islamic Republic was deterred by Obama because he had China and Russia on board. He was not deterred by Trump, who was alone and was only accompanied by Netanyahu. We have to make the best of a bad situation.
Mr. Brodsky, wrap it up for us before we take a break.
Yes, I think we have to be careful with this pending understanding that is being reported, because the international negotiating position with respect to the Islamic Republic, in my view, has collapsed. Before 2013, it was zero enrichment. Now we're going to be going into a deal that basically legitimizes 60% enrichment as long as it's down blended. So we have to look and see how the Iranian regime interprets our weakness and our negotiating posture. And that's of deep concern. And the U.S. and Israel, regardless of whether there's a deal or no deal, needs to correct that impression and increase their deterrence.
And of course, the question remains, will a nuclear deal increase or decrease the prospects, the likelihood of a direct confrontation? But hold your thoughts right there, because we will continue from that point exactly right after the break. Mr. Jason Brodsky, Dr. Meir Javendafar, and Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, you're staying with us, and so should you, dear viewers. A few minutes break, and we're back with the summit. Welcome back to the summit. Still with us, Dr. Meir Javendafar, Mr. Jason Brodsky, and Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves, Jonathan Conricus. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for staying with us. We're also staying on topic, of course, but before we get back to our conversation, what's the number one rule in geopolitics? To emerge as the winning party, or at least maintain the optics of such. And this is the message coming out of Tehran. Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi saying we're not the ones to go down on our knees. Let's take a listen.
We're pursuing nuclear negotiations with honour, wisdom and good intentions, but we won't beg, meaning we will follow diplomacy in a respectable manner, sit at the discussion table, but won't make people's lives depend on the talks.
So let's get to it, gentlemen. Another quick fire round, 30 seconds each. Is a nuclear deal in Iran's best interest? Dr. Javendafar, please take the lead.
Well, Iran has got no other option. I think in Iran, there are currently 200 medicines that are in short supply. And as Zarif said in his presentation in Clubhouse 6.5 hours, about 2 weeks ago, he spoke for 6.5 hours. He said Biden was willing to negotiate with him. The people of Iran are paying a very heavy price for the lack of deal with the United States. And this is, for now, this temporary deal is the best Iran can get, because Ayatollah Khamenei needs the support of hardliners who make a lot of money by breaking sanctions.
Yeah, Lieutenant Colonel Conricus.
I think they emerge victorious, having bent the U.S. in what seems to be almost a desperate attempt to reach any kind of deal. I think it's not a good one, and I think it's probably great for Iran because they're getting a lot, paying very little, if anything, and it really is dangerous for the region, dangerous for Israel, and not good for U.S. interests.
Last but not least, Mr. Brodsky, your thoughts?
I agree. I think it's very good for Iran, the understanding that's being reported, because it would vindicate Ayatollah Khamenei's strategy of blowing through what were thought to be red lines from the P5+1 as to Iran's nuclear program. And let's widen the aperture here a little bit. The Islamic Republic has had a very good few months diplomatically. It has been able to normalize relations with Saudi Arabia without really paying a meaningful price. And so this will reinforce for the system that it can get away with its bad behavior.
So let's start our conversation from that point exactly. Mr. Brodsky, has the days of Iranian isolation over?
Well, I don't want to overstate that their isolation is over. I think that U.S. sanctions remain on the Islamic Republic, and no Western business is going to engage in significant transactions with the Islamic Republic as long as that's the case. So that is a reality. But that being said, as I mentioned before, the Iranian system has had a lot of victories lately in its foreign policy. And I think that speaks to the fact that it has played a long game and has achieved normalization with Saudi Arabia, something it's wanted for a while, without really having to pay a meaningful price.
Dr. Javendafar, yeah.
Well, to be honest with you, is Iran coming out of isolation? What did they get exactly out of their meetings with Saudi Arabia? Can someone please tell me what they got? They're not going to get investment because Iran is sanctioned and is blacklisted by the Financial Action Task Force. If anything, Iran had to give up a very important ally in Yemen, in the Middle East, which is the Houthis. And for that, what did they get? They can no longer use the Houthis to pressure the Saudis. They can no longer use the Houthis to project power. They can no longer use the Houthis to basically increase as an excuse to increase the budget of the IRGC. I actually don't see Iran coming out of this deal as the better side. I think Khamenei was forced into this deal by Xi Jinping. He's one of the two people that Khamenei cannot say no to, the other being, of course, Vladimir Putin. And yes, Iran is improving relations with Saudi Arabia, but no, I don't see Iran coming out of isolation.
And just to know, since you've mentioned China, and circling back to our earlier discussion of the Israeli balancing act between Washington and Beijing, reports in Israeli media indicate that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu might be heading to China as early as next month. And let me just remind you, no invitation from the White House just yet. So definitely it is all profoundly intertwined in this respect. Lieutenant Colonel Conricus, from the American standpoint, what message is it sending to other adversaries, not just in the Middle East, but all around the world? Just, be patient enough and wait for the administration to change to get what you want?
Yes, and more so, I think that the Iranians, being long-term thinkers and of strategic patience, have been able to understand the pressure points on the Biden administration, have used them and leveraged them well, and have gained, I think what everybody agrees is a very good agreement or understanding from their perspective. I don't think that the deal with the Saudis under Chinese auspices was bad for Iran. Contrary, I think it was good, because the Houthis were designed specifically for that purpose, to be a thorn in the Saudi side in order to divert attention. They served that purpose, and now, according to...
What did Iran get, Jonathan? What did Iran get from this deal? Please tell the back of a stamp.
Exactly. I think that, first of all, they got back on the global stage. They are expanding their diplomatic capabilities.
Break a fingernail for them.
the Saudis will only break fingernails for themselves, and also that there's a question mark about breaking fingernails. But I think that Iran got back on the global stage in terms of diplomatic power. They are showing their adversaries as well as their allies and proxies that they're making headway, both militarily by proxy organizations and both legally and diplomatically. And now, if they get this so-called understanding with the US, I think it's another link in a chain of successes that the Iranians are able to sew together or to link together. I think it's unfortunate, and I would think that it's much related to the fact that the Iranians understand very clearly that nobody, except maybe for Israel, but nobody really is willing to use force and stand up against Iran, not in terms of their nuclear capabilities and not in terms of the havoc and terrorism that they're spreading in the Middle East.
Jason Brodsky.
Yes, I think the jury is still out on the Houthis and whether Iran has actually provided a concession to the Saudis in that regard. The United States has kept interdicting weaponry that's been shipped from the Islamic Republic to Yemen. And I think that the Houthis can be easily turned against Israel now that we have this normalization with Saudi. So I think that the Houthis will still be a lethal, threatening force at the end of the day. So I think we need to monitor that very closely. I agree. I think that regarding the broader posture of the United States, the problem with our Iran policy or lack thereof has been twofold. One is the lack of bipartisan consensus on what an acceptable Iran strategy is. And second, we don't have an ability, or we have not demonstrated an ability to be able to push back against the Islamic Republic in the non-nuclear side. We've only done so sporadically. There have been 83 attacks on U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria since 2021. We've only responded around 4 times. That's a very bad record and doesn't necessarily speak to U.S. reinforcing deterrence, especially when we're targeting just the proxies, not the IRGC itself.
Yeah, gentlemen, now we're nearing the end of our discussion. So very briefly, should or if and when a nuclear deal is revived, should Israel act? Dr. Javendafar.
For what? To be honest with you, if there's a deal then and Iran's enrichment at 60% is stopped, that's good for Israel. To attack what exactly, Eli? And the IAEA keeps inspecting Iran. The reason why we found out the Iranians, it turns out mistakenly, were enriching uranium at 84% is because the IAEA made an unannounced visit to an Iranian site. Iran, thanks to the Iran nuclear deal, is the most inspected country in the world, and of course, but it's been unfortunately reduced because of Trump walking out of the nuclear deal. We've got to understand 2 things. If you want to be successful with the Islamic Republic of Iran, you need to be strong militarily, of course, not like the United States, who doesn't respond to attacks against its troops. But you also need to be strong diplomatically. You need to have the international community on your side. Otherwise, the Iranians will not take you seriously. And this is why it's important to have this deal with the Iranians, because the international community...
So judging by the components you've mentioned, Israel has 1 yes, 1 not so much. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for this. 2 minutes, and we're back.